Do you remember the last time you got angry? What did that anger cost you? Perhaps it was a relationship, an opportunity, or simply the peace in your heart. Emotions, when they explode like a fire, can burn everything in their path, leaving regret and pain behind. But do you know that even in the midst of such anger, there lies an opportunity to learn self-control and rediscover your inner peace? Today, we'll explore a simple yet profound art, staying silent in moments of anger. In Buddhism, this is not only a way to protect ourselves from negative consequences, but also a path to inner enlightenment. Through this conversation, I wish to accompany you, not as a teacher, but as a companion on your journey to understanding yourself. Part 1. Understanding anger. Anger, as you see, is a deeply human emotion. It can arise in an instant, triggered by an offhand comment, an unintended action, or just a day when nothing seems to go right. But have you ever paused to ask yourself, what is anger really? Where does it begin? And why does it hold such power to make us lose ourselves in a fleeting moment? In psychology, anger is defined as a natural emotional response to feelings of threat, injustice, or frustration. It's part of our survival mechanism, a signal that something needs our attention. But anger isn't merely a feeling, it's energy. An energy that, if left unchecked, can quickly spread and destroy like wildfire. From a Buddhist perspective, anger isn't an enemy but a mirror reflecting our own mind. The Buddha taught that anger arises from ignorance, our inability to see the true nature of the world and the events around us. When angry, we often blame others or external circumstances, forgetting that anger actually originates within ourselves. Consider this. Have you ever felt angry when someone didn't reply to your message promptly? You wait, your mind filled with assumptions. They don't care about me anymore. They're ignoring me on purpose. But what's the reality? Perhaps they're busy, their phone ran out of battery, or they simply needed some time for themselves. Your anger doesn't stem from their actions, but from the expectations you created. In modern life, the triggers for anger are even more diverse and complex. We're stressed by work, pressured by social media, or frustrated by perceived injustices in relationships. Small misunderstandings can escalate into major conflicts simply because each person views the situation from a different angle. Amidst all this chaos, we often forget that we have the power to choose how we respond. This is where the practice of mindful silence emerges as a powerful tool. When you feel anger rising, instead of reacting impulsively, pause and remain silent. Don't see this silence as suppression or avoidance of the issue. Rather, view it as a moment to reconnect with yourself. Take deep breaths, notice the tension in your body, and observe your thoughts. You might realize that anger, like a dark cloud, is temporary. By not reacting immediately, the anger will begin to fade, allowing clarity to return. A friend of mine, a meditation teacher, once shared a moment when she faced her own anger. One evening, after a long and exhausting day, her young child accidentally spilled water on her laptop. Anger flared up inside her like a fire, but instead of yelling or punishing her child, she paused, looked into her child's frightened eyes, and took a deep breath. "It's just a laptop," she told herself. "My child is more important." In that moment, she realized that anger wasn't the enemy. It was an opportunity to practice love and compassion. You see, when we understand that anger is a natural part of the mind, we stop resisting it. By choosing silence over reaction, we not only avoid regrettable consequences, but also open the door to deeper self-awareness. Silence is not weakness. It is strength, the strength of peace and self-mastery. And what could be more valuable than peace within your soul? Part 2. The consequences of anger. Have you ever noticed how anger can change everything in just a few seconds? It's like a stone thrown into a still pond, creating ripples that reach far beyond what you expected. A thoughtless word, an impulsive act in a moment of rage, and suddenly, you find yourself amidst chaos. wondering how things spiraled out of control. I remember an old friend of mine, a talented individual with a fiery temper. He was the kind of person who could be easily provoked, especially when he felt treated unfairly. Once, during a meeting with his boss and colleagues, one of his ideas was bluntly dismissed. Anger surged within him, and instead of listening to the reasoning, he lashed out. Harsh, bitter words filled the room, freezing the atmosphere. Later, he told me that as soon as he left the meeting, he realized he had just damaged a vital professional relationship. Nobody wanted to work with someone who couldn't control their emotions. Uncontrolled anger is like a storm that destroys everything in its path. It doesn't just harm your relationships with others. It also takes a toll on your own health. Scientists have shown that when we're angry, our bodies release large amounts of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. While these hormones can help in short-term stressful situations, frequent anger can wreak havoc over time. High blood pressure, heart issues, and a weakened immune system, these are the prices we pay for our emotional outbursts. I'm reminded of a story shared by an elderly neighbor, a retired doctor. Once, we discussed anger, and he recounted an unforgettable patient. The patient was a young, healthy man who suffered a stroke after a heated argument with a business partner. When he regained consciousness, he couldn't speak as he once did and spent years in rehabilitation. Anger took everything from him, the doctor said. In just a few minutes, it changed his entire life. But anger doesn't only harm our physical health. It leaves deep cracks in our spirit and relationships. Another friend shared her painful experience of divorce. After years of constant arguments with her husband, they decided to part ways. According to her, the arguments were rarely about significant issues but often stemmed from trivial, everyday matters. A careless remark, an unchecked outburst, and resentment gradually piled up over time, until there was nothing left to save. She told me that if she and her husband had learned to truly listen to each other, rather than letting anger dictate their actions, things might have been different. The saddest thing about anger is that it clouds our judgment. Our minds become shrouded, and we make decisions we later regret. A lawyer friend once told me about witnessing lives destroyed because of a single moment of lost control. One client, a previously exemplary father, faced domestic violence charges after a heated argument with his wife. In his rage, he acted in a way that couldn't be undone. "He's not a bad person," my friend said, but in that moment, anger turned him into someone even he couldn't recognize. Reflecting on all these stories, it becomes clear that anger is never the answer. It doesn't solve problems, bring peace, or make us feel better. Instead, it robs us of so much: our health, happiness, and cherished relationships. There's a Buddhist story I often think of when considering the consequences of anger. A man once approached the Buddha and asked, "How can I get rid of my anger?" The Buddha handed him a burning stick and said, "Hold this." Hesitant but obedient, the man did so. Within seconds, he dropped the stick, wincing in pain from the burn. The Buddha said, "Anger is like that burning stick. The longer you hold onto it, the more it hurts you. When we let go of anger, we're not just protecting others, we're also protecting ourselves." Letting go doesn't mean ignoring or suppressing our feelings. Instead, it means recognizing and understanding that anger doesn't define us. It's a temporary state, and we have the power to choose how we respond. Choosing calmness, understanding, and a life free from the control of negative emotions is the greatest gift you can give yourself. Part 3. A historical and philosophical perspective. Looking back at history, ancient stories from Buddhist scriptures shine like a guiding torch, helping us understand anger and the power of mastering it. These aren't just fables but timeless truths that remain relevant even in our modern lives. Let me share a story from the time of the Buddha. One day, a man came to the Buddha, filled with burning anger. He shouted accusations at the Buddha, blaming him for disrupting people's lives with his unconventional teachings. Strangely, instead of reacting or arguing, the Buddha simply sat there, smiling and listening. When the man finished, the Buddha calmly asked, "If someone brings you a gift, but you choose not to accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man, puzzled, replied, "To the one who brought it." The Buddha smiled and said, "Then your anger, I do not accept it. It remains yours." This story serves as a mirror, reflecting how we often take on others' anger and let it harm us. The Buddha didn't deny the existence of anger, but he taught that we could choose not to let it control our minds. Anger belongs to the other person unless we accept it. Centuries later, renowned Buddhist figures continued to inspire through their wisdom and compassion. Thich Nhat Hanh, the beloved Zen master, often compared anger to a crying baby. You cannot yell at or ignore a crying baby. Instead, you must hold and care for it with tenderness. He shared that when we recognize our anger and confront it mindfully, we create a space for healing. In his famous book Anger, Thich Nhat Hanh described how he managed negative emotions in challenging situations. Once, a disciple of his made a significant mistake. Instead of scolding the disciple, Thich Nhat Hanh walked into the garden and tended to the flowers in silence. He explained that caring for the garden not only calmed his emotions but also allowed him to view the situation with clarity. When he returned, he could address the mistake with patience and understanding. He taught that maintaining inner peace not only helps us navigate life's challenges, but also nurtures meaningful relationships. I recall an experience of my own when I faced a situation that made me extremely angry. One sweltering afternoon, while driving on a crowded street, a car abruptly cut me off, forcing me to slam on the brakes. Rage flared up, and I felt like yelling at the driver. But at that moment, I remembered Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching of holding anger. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that the other driver might be stressed or exhausted, just like me. Strangely, within seconds, I felt a wave of relief. Instead of letting anger dictate my actions, I chose to let go and continue my journey. The teachings of Buddhist masters are not rigid rules but compassionate guidance that invites us to reconnect with ourselves. When we learn to view anger as a part of ourselves rather than an enemy, we begin to transform. From a potentially destructive emotion, anger becomes an opportunity to practice compassion and patience. Such stories are not confined to scriptures. They can be found in everyday life if we pause and listen. A friend of mine, who used to have a short temper, underwent a complete transformation after attending a short meditation retreat. He shared that during the retreat, he learned to observe his emotions as they arose rather than letting them take over. One day, when his young son accidentally broke his favorite phone, instead of yelling as he might have in the past, he sat down, looked at his son, and said, "It's okay. Are you all right?" At that moment, he realized that staying calm not only made him feel lighter but also taught his son how to face mistakes with composure. In the light of understanding and mindfulness, anger is no longer something to fear or avoid. It becomes a teacher, showing us how to love ourselves and those around us. By choosing to maintain inner peace, we not only live a more meaningful life but also spread that peace to others. Perhaps this is the greatest gift that Buddhist philosophy and history have given us. A path to live more gently and deeply. Part 4: Practical Techniques for Managing Anger. Every time anger flares up, it's like a volcano erupting. Many of us try to suppress or avoid facing it. But the more we suppress, the stronger it pushes to break free. Instead of fighting it, why not learn to face, accept, and transform it into something positive? Imagine anger as an old friend visiting you, bringing lessons to learn if you know how to listen. One of the most powerful tools for dealing with anger is the breath. It might sound simple, but pausing to take deep breaths can make a significant difference. When anger begins to rise, take a moment to focus on your breathing. Try inhaling slowly for 4 seconds, holding your breath for 4 seconds, then exhaling slowly for 6 seconds. Repeat this cycle a few times, and you'll feel the tension in your body start to dissolve and your mind become clearer. Breathing not only calms the nervous system but also creates a space between emotion and reaction. I remember a time at an airport, standing in a long queue, when someone behind me accidentally bumped into me and complained about it. In an instant, anger sparked, not because of the bump but because of their rude tone. However, instead of turning around to confront them, I paused, took a deep breath, and reminded myself, this person might be having a worse day than I am. After a few breaths, I felt lighter. When I turned around, I smiled and said, "It's okay." To my surprise, the person's demeanor softened, and they nodded with an apology. Without that moment to breathe, the situation could have escalated into a meaningless argument. In addition to breathing, meditation is a fantastic method for managing emotions, especially anger. You don't need to spend hours in silence. Sometimes just a few minutes a day can work wonders. One effective practice is mindful anger meditation. Find a quiet place, close your eyes, and focus on how you feel. Don't try to push the anger away or judge it. Instead, observe it. What does it feel like in your body? Is it a heat in your chest, a tension in your shoulders, or a weight in your mind? By observing your anger objectively, you'll realize it's just a part of you, not the entirety of who you are. This awareness can help you be gentler with yourself and others. A friend once used this method during a tense situation with his boss. He was publicly criticized for a minor mistake in front of colleagues. Normally, he would have argued back to defend himself, but this time, he chose to stay silent. While his boss spoke, he focused on his breathing and observed his feelings of discomfort. When he responded, it was with calmness and clarity, explaining the issue constructively. The result surprised everyone, earning him respect from both his boss and colleagues. He realized that staying composed not only protected his dignity but also built trust in his relationships. Another technique I frequently use is the reflection pause. When you feel anger rising, give yourself time before responding. You don't have to react immediately, no matter how urgent the situation feels. Tell yourself, "I'll respond in 10 minutes." This pause allows you to process your emotions, think clearly, and make better decisions. Interestingly, in many cases, after just 10 minutes, you may realize the issue isn't as serious as you initially thought. I once faced such a situation at work. A colleague sent me an email with comments I found unfair. My first impulse was to reply immediately to defend myself. But then, I remembered the advice to pause. I closed the email, got up, poured a glass of water, and stepped outside for some fresh air. When I returned, I reread the email with a fresh perspective. Instead of criticizing my colleague, I wrote a calm and constructive response. Not only did this resolve the issue, but it also improved our working relationship. I realized that quick reactions aren't always the best solution. Thoughtful responses and patience are often the keys. Of course, we can't always avoid situations that provoke our anger, but practicing techniques like deep breathing, meditation, and pausing for reflection not only helps us manage anger in the moment, but also strengthens our minds for future challenges. Think of it as exercise for the soul. You wouldn't expect your body to be fit after one gym session. And similarly, you can't master your emotions after just a few attempts. But with daily commitment, the transformation can be profound. The most important lesson I've learned from these practices isn't just about calming anger. It's about loving yourself. When you stay calm, you not only make your own life easier, but also create a peaceful space for those around you. And that, I believe, is the greatest gift you can give to the world. Part 5. Transforming anger into compassion. When we think about anger, we often associate it with negativity, a force that destroys relationships, health, and peace. Yet, few realize that hidden within anger lies an opportunity to transform it into something remarkable. Like fire, anger can both destroy and warm. It can be a destructive storm or a force for change and growth. The outcome depends entirely on how we choose to engage with it. I recall a time when I experienced deep anger. A close friend had done something that felt like betrayal. At first, I was consumed by resentment, wondering how someone I trusted could act that way. But as the days passed and I reflected, I began to ask myself, why did she act this way? Perhaps she was dealing with challenges I didn't know about. This thought reminded me of Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching. Understanding is the foundation of compassion. When I started viewing her actions not only from my perspective but also from hers, things became clearer. I realized she was carrying her own pain, and her actions reflected struggles she hadn't yet resolved. What began as anger gradually turned into empathy. Instead of distancing myself, I chose to listen and have an open conversation. Remarkably, that empathy not only healed our relationship but also helped me grow as a person. Anger, when understood correctly, can indeed lead us to compassion. Part of this process involves asking, where does this anger come from? Is it rooted in hurt, feeling disrespected, or unmet expectations? Recognizing that anger often stems from pain makes it easier to empathize, not just with others but also with ourselves. Understanding the source of anger is like holding the key to a door that opens into compassion. One unforgettable story I read is about a man named Hiroshi in Japan. He lost his family in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. His grief and anger burned inside him daily. He wanted revenge, to see the driver suffer as he had. But in a moment of reflection, Hiroshi decided to meet the driver. Instead of confronting him with hostility, he listened to the man's story. Hiroshi discovered that the driver was living in his own torment of guilt and self-blame. Realizing this, Hiroshi understood that punishment was not the answer. He chose forgiveness and even helped the driver rebuild his life as a way to honor his own family's memory. Hiroshi later shared that forgiveness wasn't for the other person but for himself. It freed him from the chains of anger. More importantly, it allowed him to turn his anger into a reminder to live fully and positively. He began volunteering at centers to help those struggling with alcoholism, educating them about the dangers of drunk driving. He transformed his pain into meaningful action, which brought him peace. I often think that if anger is like fire, compassion is the water that can soothe it. But this water doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. It's a choice, a decision to channel anger into positive energy. This doesn't mean ignoring or suppressing our feelings. Instead, it means facing anger honestly, recognizing it, understanding it, and finding a way to use it for good. There's a Buddhist concept called turning anger into gold. It means that when anger is transformed, it becomes a valuable asset, can motivate us to stand up against injustice, correct wrongs, or simply learn to live with greater kindness. Just as gold is forged through intense pressure, compassion emerges through understanding and confronting pain. Another friend of mine, a social activist, once told me that her anger at injustice fuels her work. But she emphasized that it's important not to let anger become a destructive force. I don't let myself be consumed by anger, she said. I use it as a guiding light to create the change that's needed. Her story taught me that anger isn't always the enemy. If we learn how to harness and transform it, anger can become a powerful source of inspiration for good, can help us build a better world, starting with ourselves. Within each of us lies the potential to transform anger into compassion. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Every time we choose understanding over reaction, forgiveness over resentment, we not only bring peace to ourselves but also spread positive energy to those around us. This, I believe, is how we turn anger into gold, turning challenges into opportunities for growth and bringing goodness into the world. Part 6. Long-term strategies for emotional stability. When it comes to managing emotions, especially intense ones like anger, most of us think of short-term solutions, taking deep breaths, pausing for a few minutes, or going for a walk to calm the mind. But have you ever considered that by building a solid foundation in your daily life, those bursts of anger might never gain the strength to surface as they once did? Emotional stability isn't something that happens in the moment. It's the result of a series of small, consistent habits accumulated over time. Meditation has been one of the most essential strategies I've practiced to maintain emotional balance. Far from being something mystical, meditation is simply a way to connect with yourself and quiet the mind amidst life's chaos. I began meditating a few years ago when I found myself frequently losing control in stressful situations. First, sitting still and focusing on my breath was challenging. My mind raced with countless thoughts, from past regrets to future anxieties. But then I realized I didn't have to force my mind to stop. I just needed to observe, listen, and let everything pass naturally. One morning, after meditating for about 10 minutes, I stepped out to start my day. When an unexpected situation arose, a stressful work call, instead of reacting with frustration as I usually would, I found myself breathing more deeply and feeling calmer. Meditation hadn't changed the situation, but it had changed how I responded to it. Over time, I realized that meditation not only helps control sudden outbursts of anger, but also creates a mental shield, equipping me to face life's greater challenges. In addition to meditation, lifestyle plays a crucial role in maintaining emotional stability. I once reconnected with an old friend who had been known for his temper. Now, however, he was entirely different, calm, thoughtful, and always wearing a gentle smile. When I asked him about his transformation, he shared that it all started with small changes in his daily life. He began paying attention to his diet, incorporating more greens and natural foods while avoiding processed foods and sugary treats. He told me that when the body is well nourished, the mind feels lighter, too. Exercise also became a key part of his journey. He started with jogging a few times a week, eventually adding yoga and leisurely walks. These activities not only kept him physically fit, but also served as a way to release built-up tension. Inspired, I took his advice, and morning runs under the gentle sunlight have since become my favorite part of the day. There's something magical about letting your body move, releasing tension with every step, every breath. But it's not just diet or exercise that makes a difference. Sleep, often overlooked, is another critical factor. I used to push myself to work late into the night, thinking a few hours of rest would suffice. But over time, I noticed myself becoming more irritable, impatient, and unable to focus. When I prioritized getting enough sleep, my mood improved significantly. I felt calmer and had more energy to tackle the day's challenges. Equally important as caring for your body is building a network of emotional support. No one can handle everything alone, and in moments of vulnerability, it's friends, family, or a supportive community that offer comfort and strength. I remember a tough time at work when frustration and anger weighed heavily on me. I called a close friend, who didn't offer advice but simply listened. That act of listening made me realize that my emotions weren't something to hide or suppress. By sharing and being understood, I felt a part of the burden lift. I've also found that joining community groups or attending classes, such as yoga or meditation sessions, not only provides new skills but also fosters a sense of belonging. Community isn't just about receiving support, it's also about learning to give. When you help others navigate their emotions, you also learn to manage your own. Emotional stability isn't achieved overnight. It's the result of a long process where every small action contributes to building a better version of yourself. When you choose to meditate daily, care for your body through nutrition and exercise, prioritize rest, and lean on your loved ones, you create a life that is not only peaceful but also meaningful. This journey doesn't just help you manage anger. It opens the door to living with gratitude, patience, and genuine happiness. And I believe that's the greatest gift you can give yourself. When we pause to listen to the voice within, when we choose silence over outburst, something miraculous happens. Anger ceases to be a consuming fire and transforms into a source of energy, a valuable lesson. You see, controlling anger is not just about avoiding mistakes or harm. It's about cultivating compassion and understanding. As a Zen master once said, "Let anger be the door to your compassion." So, the next time you feel anger rising, what will you do? Will you take a deep breath, remain silent, or try to see the person before you through the lens of empathy? Most importantly, will you turn that anger into an opportunity for growth? The answer lies within you. Slow down and let your heart speak. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. If you found this story helpful, feel free to share it with someone who might need it. Who knows, one day, you might become the inspiration for someone else on this journey.